Okay, so today we are going to do a deep dive. We're going to tackle something that you flagged as a concept you wanted to explore a bit more, and that is the whole idea of primary versus secondary metabolites.
Right. Yeah, that distinction can be kind of tricky.
Yeah. So, when we think about metabolites in general, we're really talking about those molecules that organisms produce and use during, all that metabolic magic.
Exactly. It's like all the chemical stuff happening inside to keep life ticking.
Totally. But then there's this split, right? We've got the primaries and the secondaries. And the mission here is to really clarify, based on the material you provided, how these two types actually differ.
Absolutely. I think we can shed some light on that.
So let's start with, I guess the more fundamental of the two, the primary metabolites.
Mhm.
And our source tells us these are really the essential ones, like absolutely crucial for an organism's basic survival.
Yeah, the non-negotiables. They're directly involved in all those processes that keep an organism, well, alive and functioning. Things like growth, development, reproduction.
So like the bare minimum to exist, basically.
Pretty much. Think of the building blocks of life, like carbohydrates for energy, lipids for structure, proteins doing all the work in cells, and nucleic acids carrying the genetic code.
Right. The VIPs of the molecular world.
Exactly. Though your source doesn't specifically list them out, those are all great examples of what primary metabolites are all about.
Okay, that makes sense. So then we move on to the secondary metabolites. And the immediate thing that jumps out from our material is that they're, well, not directly involved in those core life processes we just talked about.
Yeah. They're playing a different game, it seems.
Right. So it sounds like if primary metabolites are the essentials, the secondaries are maybe more like, I don't know, the extras.
Yeah, you could think of it that way. And the information you provided highlights that they actually differ across three main aspects: their roles, their production, and their characteristics.
Okay, I like it. A framework.
Yeah.
Let's break it down then, starting with those roles. So we've established that primary metabolites are, the life-sustaining superstars.
Yeah, their role is pretty clear-cut. They are essential, period.
Essential. Got it. Now, when we look at the secondary metabolites, our source says point blank that they're not directly tied to those same essential processes. So that's like the key difference right there, isn't it?
Absolutely. That's the fundamental distinction.
Makes sense to me. Okay, so roles check. What about their production? Does our source give us any insights into how these two types are made differently?
It does. Your material explicitly mentions that primary and secondary metabolites differ in their production. Now, it doesn't go into specifics like the nitty-gritty biochemical pathways or anything.
Bummer. I was hoping for some juicy molecular details.
Maybe another time. But the source does point out that the way they're synthesized by the organism is distinct. So even without the specifics, we know there's a fundamental difference in how they're made.
Got it. So different assembly lines, even if we don't know exactly what those lines look like.
Exactly.
All right, cool. And how about their characteristics? Does our source drop any hints about what might set them apart in terms of, their properties?
It does, actually. The source indicates that primary and secondary metabolites have different characteristics, but again, it's not super specific.
Okay, so no details on whether we're talking size, solubility, stability, or something else entirely.
Nope. Just a general statement that they are, in fact, different. So there's definitely more to uncover there.
Okay. A little bit frustrating, but I guess that's the nature of a deep dive sometimes.
Sometimes you got to dig a little deeper on your own, right?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So let's bring it all together based on what we have here. The main takeaway is the difference in their roles. Primary metabolites are essential, gotta have them for life kind of molecules, while secondary metabolites aren't directly in that category. Plus, the source tells us they differ in their production and their characteristics, even though we don't have all the specifics.
I think you've summarized it perfectly. The essential nature of primary metabolites is definitely the key point that your source emphasizes.
Awesome. So, listener, understanding this basic split, this fundamental difference, gives you a window into the incredibly diverse world of biochemicals that are at play within living things.
Yeah, it's a really cool concept.
Think of it this way. Primary metabolites are like keeping the lights on, essential, gotta have them. Secondary metabolites, on the other hand, are maybe more like adding some mood lighting. Not essential for basic function, but they definitely bring something else to the table.
I like that analogy. And this leads to a really interesting question to ponder, right? If secondary metabolites aren't essential for day-to-day survival, why do organisms even bother to produce them?
That is a great question.
It is. Consider how these seemingly non-essential compounds might actually provide some significant advantages or maybe even enable certain adaptations for organisms in particular environments, even if that's not strictly required for those basic biological functions.
Hmm. That's really making me think.
Right. It's a fascinating area of research where the non-essential might actually be the key to thriving.
The unsung heroes of the molecular world, maybe? Well, on that note, we'll leave you to ponder that. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time.
Yeah, thanks for listening.